Let's add inversions to our musical vocabulary today. The objectives of the lesson are to review the three forms of the musical alphabet, to introduce chord inversions in music, to provide examples of inversions, and to provide SATB examples of inversions. So let's look at the three forms. Form 1, consecutive letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, so forth, for scales. Form 2, which we will need for this video, F, A, C, E, G, B, D, F. That's for chords, it's every other letter. Then form 3, bead, G, C, F. That's for keys, that's every other letter, or every two letters, excuse me. Now, when we look at our chords, let's take a look at them for a second and let's add some vocabulary to it. We have our C major chord, which we spelled many times. It is spelled C-E-G. In this case, and in any case with a chord like this, C is the root of the chord because it is called a C chord. That first note you hear is the root. E in this case is the third of the chord because it is a third above the root. That's the interval it appears above the root. And then G is the fifth of the chord because it is a fifth above the root. So now, how does this apply to inversions? Well, let's spell the chords and give a few examples now. C-E-G, that's how we've most commonly spelled this chord. In this case, we call this root position because the root is the first note I stated. It will be in the bottom, it will be in the bass line, C-E-G. What if I spell the chord E-G-C? What if I had E first or E in the bottom? Well, that is what we will call first inversion, which means that the third of the chord is in the bottom, it is in the bass, it is the first one mentioned. And then finally, if I spell the chord G-C-E, that would be called second inversion, which means the fifth of the chord is in the bottom, it is in the bass, it is the first I have mentioned. So now, let's look at it at a different way, the way you would normally see it in music. If we had our SATB and our chord, again, C-E-G, let's look at how we're going to spell this chord and how we would populate our SATB voices. If we wanted the chord in root position, the important part, C is in the bass. And then I put the other two notes and populate them in the other voices. And in this case, I'll just put it in the tenor and alto. Still have C-E-G, but C's in the bass, root position. Now, let's go back to first inversion. What would be in the bass? The third of the chord, which is E. And now I'm missing the other two voices, which are C and G and C here. And that's how I finish spelling the chord. So in first inversion, E is in the bass in this case. Second inversion, that means the fifth is in the bass. What is the fifth of the chord? G is. And then I just populate the other voices. Let's do another example. SATB, my chord is G, B, D. So I got those three letters, and I want to see how I spell it and put it in inversions. So root position, I have to put the root in the bass, which is G. Then I fill the rest of the voices in B, D. What about first inversion? That means the third of the chord is in the bass, which is B. Then fill in the rest of the voices. What about second inversion? Who has to be in the bass now? Well, that's the fifth of the chord, which is D. Then I fill in the voices. Now let's really populate this and use four voices and see if you can figure out whether I'm in root position, first inversion, or second inversion. Here's our SATB. Here's our chord, F-A-C. Now I've spelled it. Let's look at it. You see every note's accounted for, F-A-C, and I actually doubled the F, which is the root. And it's also in the bass, which means this is in root position. Now let's look at the chord spelled this way, C-F-A-F. C is in the bottom, it is in the bass, it is the fifth of the chord, therefore I'm in second inversion. Another example here, I've spelled it a different way. A is in the bass, which means it's the third of the chord, which means it's in first inversion. Let's do one more. SATB, our chord this time E-G-B. Here we go. What's in the bass? G is, which is the third, which means first inversion. Let's do it again. What's in the bass? B is, which means it's the fifth of the chord here. If you look up at the chord, that means it's second inversion. And then we have this, E is in the bass, which means it's in root position. And that's basically how we use inversions with our chords and how we discuss them. Thanks for watching.